The best of downtown from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. This is the best of downtown.
Well, good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into downtown on this 26th day of October. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole with you on 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. Remind you that you can follow the program on Twitter at Downtown Rich K. We're on Facebook as well, Downtown with Rich Kimball. And we do the show live every Monday through Friday from 4 until 6. And then Sunday mornings we gather up the best of the week and sometimes dip into the archives, as we will today on the program. We'll hear from Gary Tanguay, talk a little Patriots as we get ready for their game with the Bears this afternoon. Jesse Connolly talk some Bruins with us. Singer-songwriter Howie Day, who performed at the Gracie Theater on Friday night, will check in. Plus, Maine basketball coach Bob Walsh. And as we close in on Election Day, we thought it would be good to talk a little history, talk about two of our presidents, one of them at least considered among the greats of all time, Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and our friend Doris Kearns Goodwin, her recent book, The Bully Pulpit, all about the relationship between those two presidents. Kick things off this morning, though, getting ready for Bears and Patriots today. Pre-game show starts at 10 this morning with Gary Tanguay and Andy Gresh, but we caught up with Tanguay earlier this week and talked with him about how the season's going for the New England Patriots. With Halloween approaching, for New England sports fans, what would be the scariest Halloween costume?
The Bears winning. However you want to put it, a victorious bear. How about that on Sunday? Because after that, it's going to get really hard, really difficult. They're going to take care of business and beat these guys, and they should. But that's the scary thought right now to me, Rich, because, boy, that stretch after the Bears, it's brutal.
Well, I look at this team at 5-2, and we were just talking about it a few minutes ago. I don't feel like we know any more than we did 5-6 weeks ago as to how good or how bad this team can be down the stretch.
Yeah, you're right, Rich. You're right. And to Belichick's credit, he always says he never knows. He'll say, week 8, or he'll say, November, 9, 10, November 15th, something like that. He starts to figure out, what they are and who they are. And it looks like he's right. They just don't. They're 5-2, but they just don't look it. That's the thing I'm worried about. Is it just the Jet game seemed too difficult? And I understand with Mayo gone, and I don't dispute that. I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the fact is, without Mayo, and they had trouble stopping the run with Mayo, and now without Mayo, they're going to have to deal with that, and they're not deep at linebacker. So that's a problem. That's a problem. I'm sorry, that 2-point win over the Jets didn't make me feel very good. And everybody yelled at me on the radio saying, well, it was a short week. I said, well, it was a short week for the Jets, too.
So are they just a team that is good enough to win a weak division and then gets into the playoffs? It's in a crapshoot there as to whether they can win one or two.
I think that's what they are right now, Rich. I think that if to be fair, that's what they are. I don't see how you can say anything else. That's what they are. They are not as good as Denver. This is not a Denver-New England horse race anymore. Baltimore has played very well. I think that the Colts are on the rise. I think San Diego can be a dangerous team. I think it's Denver and everybody else. And New England is in the everybody else. Yes, that's what they are.
What do they have to do to get better? Is there anything they can do in terms of player personnel? It's tough to make moves in the National Football League.
That's the tough part is they made a deal today. They got the linebacker from Tennessee who is Akeem Ayers, who has played well in the past, but he had surgery on both knees, and he fell out of favor with this coaching staff in Tennessee, Ken Wisenhunt, but he's an outside guy. You don't really take the place of a Mayo. And I felt that this is where the Tommy Kelly release is coming back to haunt them. Because if you had Kelly and Vince in the middle of the defensive line, and that's going to help you, in stopping the run. But they don't have Kelly, and they, have the tomato can of the week, or they bring all these different guys in, and it's like you got to, who are these guys that are playing next to Vince? I don't think they can get better, because right now it's so hard to get better when it comes to your roster. There's talk that they could get Vincent Jackson from Tampa, and that would help a lot. Well, I mean, of course it would. But defensively, that's right. See, I think they've underachieved defensively. That's my concern. Because defensively, that was supposed to be the strength of this team. The offensive linemen in Stork and Connolly were back at practice today, so that'll help Brady. But I think kind of what you see is what you get, and you would really have to catch on fire and hope that somebody upsets Denver. I just don't see anybody right now. Right now, I just don't see anybody beating Denver. Now, if Talib gets hurt in Denver, which he has been known to do, and we know that all too well, that changes the equation.
We're talking with Gary Tanguay, Comcast Sportsnet New England, and the 98.5 Sports Hub Patriots Radio Network. You talk with Jonathan Kraft on a regular basis. You know how ownership thinks. Long term, how does this end for Tom Brady in New England? Does it end with him, as he's hinted, walking away when he knows his time is done, or is there a scenario where Brady pulls a Joe Montana and goes to play for somebody else for a couple of less than inspiring years at the end?
My feeling, he ends up playing with somebody else, and ownership will let the coach and general manager make that call. My feeling is if this year, if it doesn't end well in the playoffs, and I don't think it's going to end the way everybody wants it to, meaning a Super Bowl trip, I think that they have to seriously explore trading him for picks to try to restock this team, because what good is it to keep a Tom Brady for another year or so when you know that you don't have the horses around him that you need, to get to the Super Bowl? You have to look at the lay of the land. My feeling is 2 years, because I think he's declining, Rich. I don't think he's as accurate as he used to be, and I know he hasn't had the help, but he's never had a great arm. He worked his tail off to have a very good arm, but I think the arm strength has declined. I think the accuracy has declined. There's nobody smarter than Brady. There's nobody tougher than Brady. But I think some of the physical attributes are starting to decline. So I think in 2 years they will want to make a move, and he will want to go play somewhere else.
All right, speaking of teams that don't have the horses, Boston Celtics, you have said that you think it's time for them to part ways with Rajon Rondo, and not simply because they're not a team that can win right away, but maybe because he's not all the Celtics would like him to be in the clubhouse.
Yeah, he's not, Rich. I mean, he really hasn't been since the big three left, KG and Paul and Ray. Not so much Ray, because he and Ray didn't get along at the end, but KG and Paul really kept Rondo in check, and so did Perk. But when all of those guys left, Rondo thought that automatically he was the guy, and he's just not that type of player. I mean, Rondo runs a fantastic offense when he's committed to the strategy. He's a terrific defender when he wants to play it. But he's not a guy you build around because he's not a scorer, but he thinks he is. And I think that he kind of started to act like he was KG. For example, in Los Angeles, I'm going to stay here and celebrate my birthday. Coach says, well, I really want you to come with the team to Sacramento. No, I'm going to celebrate my birthday because that's what KG did in New York so many years ago, and Doc let him do it. So I think kind of Rondo thought he had the stripes without earning them. So I think you have to try to get something for him. He's going to want a max contract. He's not going to get it here. I don't think he's going to get it anywhere. But it is time to part ways with him and try to get something in return. And it's trying to see what Brad can do with these young guys.
Who becomes the leader of this team if Rondo's out the door?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think Marcus could. I think he was a leader in college. I think that. I don't think that leaders are born. Either you is, you ain't. You are or you're not. And I think he is one. And I think he could probably become the leader of this team. Because Rondo really doesn't want to be the leader. I mean, he says he does, and they made him captain, but he's really not that guy. He's not consistent enough. Bradley could be. Avery Bradley could be a pretty good leader, but I'd say probably Bradley or Smart would be the two guys.
All right. So how many years left in this rebuild now for the Celtics?
Oh, God, Rich, it's so hard in the NBA. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you because it's obvious. You have to stink. You have to get the number one pick, and you have to pick the right guy. You have to get really lucky because in the NBA, the way the game is played, you get one guy and it changes your franchise forever. Cleveland, LeBron, Wade, Miami, KD, with Oklahoma City, San Antonio with Tim Duncan, changes is everything. It's just you need that one superstar, that one guy who comes out in the right year, and it's just so hard to do because you get tired of tanking. So what are the Celtics supposed to do? Like stink for the next 3 years? It's hard. To me, what Danny has to do is what he did last time, and he did a very good job with it, is for the next couple of years develop players, try to build their value, and make trades in the hopes that you can get the right player or maybe a salary dump or maybe a guy who wants a new environment or maybe Marcus Smart develops into a pretty good guard and some guys want to come play with him, something along those lines. That's the only hope you have right now. It's tough. And there's nothing ownership can do about it. I mean, the Celtics, they'll spend money. I mean, Kevin Durant's going to be a free agent, in 2 years? I think, this year and the late year. But, would he come to Boston? If he went anywhere, he'd probably go to Washington, where he's from, Washington, D.C., but he loves it in Oklahoma City. It's really hard. I would not want to run an NBA team. I mean, I love the sport, but it's so hard to rebuild.
And that was Gary Tanguay of Comcast Sportsnet New England, and also the Patriots pregame show on 98.5 The Sports Hub, which you can hear right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket starting at 10 a.m., with a pregame show for the Patriots-Bears game, which will be coming up at 1 p.m. right here on 92.9 The Ticket. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here for the 26th day of October 2014. Glad to have you alongside us for this edition of the program. When we come back from our first break in the show, we'll talk with Jesse Connolly to give us a preview of how things are going in the early part of the season for this 2014-15 edition of the Boston Bruins. That and much more still to come here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and the Best of Downtown.
Best of Downtown on your Sunday morning, a previously recorded edition of the show. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole here on 92.9 The Ticket and 92.9theticket.com. Early season, some struggles for the Bruins, but bringing it around of late, playing better hockey these days. We had a chance to see how things are going in the early season as we caught up with our friend Jesse Connolly, who covers the Bruins and the entire National Hockey League for AlongTheBoards.com.
Yeah, I believe so. You look at they finally got their first winning streak of the season. Obviously, the Sabres are a far different foe than the Sharks, but I'd categorize last night's win as their best performance of the year. You see people forget sometimes how good the Sharks are because of their playoff woes, but Boston took advantage of one of their few weaknesses. They got a couple goals in the power play there, and they erased the third period deficit for the first time this season, and the first line had its best game of the year so far.
Yeah, nice to see him come from behind like that, and also nice to see memorable nights for young players like Seth Griffith last night. Yeah,
it certainly was. Seth Griffith is a kid that has shown some scoring prowess in juniors in the OHL and the AHL last year. He had a really good year for a first-year pro, 50 points in 69 games, and you never know if that's going to translate to the NHL level, but he had been playing well. He had his chances in the first two games, and he finally broke through last night, and that celebration was just really awesome.
Anybody, too, concerned with Milan Lucic, it was good to see him get back into some action last night.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a struggle for him the first 5 or so games. He had no points, and I think some bad penalties kind of made a fool of himself up there in Montreal, but he's turning things around. He's got 5 points in the last 3 games now. He had 3 assists last night, and you want to see him involved and contributing, and expectations are high for him. He's a high-paid player. He's a first-line player, and he's finally starting to come through for them.
Maybe my favorite Bruin did not have a shining moment last night. A tough evening for Bergeron.
Yeah, you don't see too many of those for him. He was on the ice for all 3 goals last night for the Sharks, and he had that, such a key cog in the penalty kill for Boston. He spent, almost the last 4 minutes of the game in the penalty box there. He took that high sticking call, and the Sharks had a number of chances to tie the game up, and luckily, the boys bailed him out there. We don't see too many nights like that for Patrice often.
No, and I'll tell you, the guy who really stepped it up last night, I thought, was Torrey Krug.
Yeah, he had a full start, much like Lucic, scored too many points there in the first few games, and then starting in that Montreal game, things started to click. He had the power play goal last night, and he had the assist on Marchand's first goal, and you just watch what he does with the puck, and it's unbelievable. The way he was twirling around at the bottom of the faceoff circle there, just faking out guys, made some nice passes. He had a really big game for them.
Is this still, in your opinion, the best defensive team, at least in the East?
Is Boston? It's tough to say. The East is kind of weak. You look around, and at the usual suspects like Pittsburgh got a little bit better on defense. They've got Ehrhoff now, and that certainly helps. But the Boychuk trade, that's a big piece to take out of a team that's gone on some pretty good playoff runs over the last few years. Like I said, you look at the East, and it's not very strong. I think the Bruins are a lock to make the playoffs, but how long will that run be? I think that depends on how the defense gels now. You've got Krug or McQuaid forced into a top 4 role. Seidenberg's been a little iffy since coming back from missing most of last year with the knee injury. So I think it'll take some time to gel. We won't judge them on how they fared through the first 8 games, but if it's a weakness, I think it's something that we'll have to try to address at the deadline there to bolster their defense going into the playoffs.
Well, and that was apparently the whole idea behind the deal, is to give them a little bit of financial flexibility down the road. What do you think it is that they'll need? Something to bolster the offense?
Yeah, you look at, why would you take out Boychuk if you're going to have to bolster the defense to fill in that hole, right? I think, the big thing you're looking at is the right side. They've had some struggles there. It's been a revolving door in the first line with Fraser got his chance when Spooner was up there, and then you had Gagne, bouncing up and down between the first line and the fourth line, and no one's really seemed to stick. So I think that's that could be one of their targets if Griffith doesn't get things going here and produce on a consistent basis. He's a second year pro, so you can't put that high of an expectation on to perform well on the first line for a team that's expected to go on a deep run. So I think that might be something that they address going forward.
Jesse, as you look around the league, what's been one or two of the biggest surprises of the early going this season?
Oh, that's tough to say. You look at I think 2 teams that I expected to do well in the Atlantic are faring pretty well so far. You've got Tampa Bay at 4-2-1. Montreal hasn't even played that well, and they're 6-1-0. So when they start to really get going, you can see them create some space from the Bruins or the other teams that are competing for that top spot in the Atlantic. But looking around, I think Washington has been one of the surprises in the Islanders. In the Metropolitan Division, Barry Trotz, you really didn't know how things were going to go with Alex Ovechkin in his first year down in D.C., and they're 3-0-2. The Islanders have won 4 out of 6. So there's certainly a few surprises. We still see some of the teams we expected to be in the basement down there, Buffalo, Carolina, but so far it's been an interesting first few weeks for the NHL.
And that was Jesse Connolly from Along the Boards talking about the Boston Bruins and their plight in the early part of this 2014-15 season. Bees looking better as of late, but still not where they wanted to be as they continue and have these aspirations for the Stanley Cup, winning it again for the first time in a couple of seasons. You listen to the best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. When we come back from the break, we'll break away from sports a little bit and get some music talk going with Howie Day from Brewer, performed at the Gracie last Friday. We'll talk to him about how his career's going and when his new album will drop. That and so much more here on Downtown with Rich Kimball, Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
It's the best of Downtown, your Sunday morning sports radio. 92.9 The Ticket, 929theticket.com. Hard to believe it was almost 10 years ago this song was a monster hit for Brewers' Howie Day.
The dawn is breaking, a light shining through.
Well, Collide got played just everywhere. Huge hit from his album Stop All the World Now. Howie Day visited the hometown this past Friday night, appearing at the Gracie Theater at Husson University. He's working on a brand new album that should be out next March, and we had a chance to talk with him on Friday afternoon about his career and what's up next for the singer-songwriter from Brewer.
Yeah, it's been very weird timing, especially with the technology stuff you mentioned. I mean, like Napster was around back when I was doing that. And that was back, when they were still doing regular, like old school record deals. They don't do that anymore. So everything has changed a lot. And it's funny, you opened the show saying into its second decade, and that really kind of freaked me out. It's true. But in a way, like that's really, been sort of my biggest goal all along. It's just, to kind of just be that guy that's still around. I want to annoy people. I want people to see my name and be like, he's still around? Oh, God.
Well, and you know the music business it's a fickle thing, and the people who go for stardom, it's great, you have it for a while, but the real key is longevity and having a career where you've got that core base of fans who love your music and follow what you do and go see the shows, and you've been able to build that because you did so many live shows early on everywhere. You worked your butt off in those early years, and that's the kind of thing that sustains a career beyond a couple of hits.
Yeah, and that's the most rewarding stuff too. You know, those people. You know, when you talk to them after a show, or when you see those same faces over and over again. You know, that's like a large extended family. You know, the hits. I don't know. Those come and go. I mean, that's just art. You know, you kind of just throw it against the wall, and sometimes it sticks. Sometimes it's the right time and place. I hope it happens again. I don't know if it will, but that's just one of those things. And those people come and go. They just follow the hits, you know, to some degree. So.
Absolutely. Well, and when it blew up for you back when 04, 05 with Stop All the World Now, Collide, that was everywhere. How many licenses did you grant for that song to TV, movies, commercials?
I did pretty good on that one.
Yeah, I would say so. But while all that was happening, as often is the case in the music business, your record company was going through some management changes and not the support that you wanted to get from the label for a follow-up hit.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, common story. I think we went through 3 or 4 different label presidents, and I mean, it's some fun, interesting story in the world, you know, but basically what happens is when labels switch out their people, they hire all their people, you know, underneath them. And then you become someone else's dirty laundry, you know. So if you do well, the person that was there before takes credit, and if you don't do well, then it's their fault. So you kind of become a liability to some degree. And it's frustrating to be in that position. So when I finally parted ways with Sony a few years ago, I was pretty happy about it, actually, to be honest. But it was a good run. I don't have anything bad to say about them. You know, like we did, you know, we had great success together, and that was about 10 years. So that was decade 1, and now we're embarking on decade 2. So, playing a show here in Bangor, I got a new record that's just about ready to come out. It'll be out early next year. Yeah. Couldn't be happier.
We're talking to Howie Day tonight at the Gracie Theater at Husson University. It's funny with the changes in the music business. It's almost that music, in a way, has come around to your way of doing things, where it's hard to make music or hard to make money selling your music, and performers are doing what you did a decade ago, and that's go out there and base your career on the live shows and the people that want to see you in person.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I think you know, in the 80s especially, you know, people made records to make money, and then they went on tour sort of for fun, you know. Now it's definitely the other way around. You know, you make a record just to get the music out there, and you basically give it away for free. I mean, you can sell it, and you can, you know, do whatever you're going to do, but if people want it, they can just get it on YouTube. You know, people can stream it for free. It's not, I mean, and you do get paid for that, but it's, you know, not what it used to be. Let's just put it that way.
Now, people who go see you at the Gracie or in any of your shows, you're going to hear some of the new music, of course, and also get to see you working at various times. I think tonight you're performing with a keyboardist, right?
Yes. So I have my band is me, a keyboardist. She's amazing, and she sings as well. I had a cellist and a drummer, so we put that together in different combinations all year long, because we're doing somewhere between 70 and 90 shows a year the last couple of years. So I do some solo, I do some with full band, do some. It just kind of depends on what the venue is. So for this one, I thought her and I, as long as we don't come off to, you know, Donnie and Marie or something, it'll be good.
Would you be a little bit country, or would you be a little bit rock and roll?
Well, there was that other really big duo thing, the Once movie, for the people that saw that, and I'm a little afraid of going there too.
Absolutely,
that's a bit precious, but I'm sure we'll figure it out for a nice long sound check today, and we'll, it's gonna be good.
But it's hard to believe it's been a long time since you've played in the old neighborhood.
I know. I was actually trying to figure that out. Actually, we were sitting at dinner last night trying to figure it out, and we all disagreed on what it was. So we don't even know when the last time I was in Bangor or even near Bangor, like University of Maine. It's been at least a decade, I think.
Wow! And for those who hear it, obviously want to know about the new music, and it looks like late winter, early spring, a target date for release of the new album.
Yeah, right around March 1st. That'll be the target date. Yeah.
And that was Maine native, Brewer native, Howie Day from last Friday on Downtown with Rich Kimball, talking about his appearance last Friday on the Gracie, and also his new album, which should be coming out fairly soon, just a couple short months. I remember listening to that hit Collide back in the day. It was such a great song, still holds up today, so we wish Howie continued success as he progresses through his career as well. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here for the 26th day of October 2014. I'm Brian Stackpole. Rich Kimball also here for this previously recorded edition of the program. When we come back from the break, we'll talk some Maine sports with Bob Walsh. We'll talk about his men's basketball team and his first season at the D1 level at the University of Maine in Orono. So we'll talk to Coach Walsh after this break here as you're listening to Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, the best of downtown.
Boy, it will not be long before basketball season gets underway for the Maine Black Bears men's and women's teams. America East polls this week. The women picked to finish 5th in the conference, and the men picked number 8. New coach Bob Walsh fired up to start this season, and we had a chance to visit with him this week and talk about the coming season, his first as head coach of the Black Bears.
I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I keep telling this to people. I've never been at a place where the people who go to school here and the people who went to school here take so much pride in the university. I mean, everybody loves it with such a passion. So the energy that you can feel on campus on a Saturday afternoon, whenever there's a football game, but, you know, now with homecoming and the number of people who were back, it was just it's a contagious energy. It was really, really cool to be a part of.
Less than 2 weeks from the game against USM. Tell us about your team. What do you like? What are you learning so far about this group?
Well, we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot about each other, which I think is fantastic. I love the fact that our guys are hungry and our guys are together. We're still, you know, we've seen a pretty significant transformation in our first 2 weeks of practice as far as the personalities of the players and sort of an identity for this team starting to form. And I just really like how coachable we are as a group. This is a group that really cares about each other, I think really wants to invest in each other. And that's huge when it comes to developing the trust you need to be a championship program. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have a long way to go. But you know, we really like what we're seeing so far out of our guys as far as the approach.
On your blog, you share a lot of your coaching philosophy, what your expectations are, not only for your players, but for yourself. And you said on Twitter, make sure your players are aware of what you value and what will earn them playing time. Create a meritocracy. That's crazy talk in the college ranks. I thought the coach was supposed to guard those secrets and not tell anybody what the expectations were.
Yeah, you know, we want our guys to understand very clearly what we expect of them, and we start with how hard we compete. It's the guys that bring it every day. And one thing we've tried to make clear to them is that what we do every day on the practice floor, that's where the minutes are going to be earned. And if you show up, you know, we value toughness. We value guys who are willing to defend. And we need to have guys that are going to compete and lay it all on the line all the time. And I just, in talking to our guys and trying get that across and thinking about what we established at Rhode Island College, you know, we really didn't have a ton of difficult conversations about playing time because we tell our guys how they're going to earn it, and then they see it right in front of them in practice every day, and they earn it. So hopefully they have a clear understanding of what we expect from them and what's going to earn them playing time when we start playing games.
Do you find, too, Bob, that players these days understand where they are in the pecking order and have a pretty clear knowledge of what they need to do to move up on the chart?
I think they do if you're clear to them about what you value and what they're supposed to do to earn that time. So we talk about competing every single day as our number one value. So I think if you're clear with them, they understand. I mean, they get it, and that's where when you create a meritocracy like that and it's earned on the practice floor, I mean, they know when they've performed well enough to earn that time or when they have to do something better, and I think that's where we're trying to get.
Do you find that guys also have a good understanding of their roles and how everybody can help the team in some fashion, whether you're out there for 25 minutes or whether you're out there for a couple of minutes?
You know, that's an interesting question because I'm not a big believer in defining roles. We talk about one role for our guys, and that's to help us win, and that's everybody's role. I think they define them for themselves, and that's where if we can get our guys to compete and lay it on the line and give a great effort every day, they're going to define the roles and understand what they can do to help the team win. If you're making a lot of plays out there that aren't going to help the team, then you're not going to play. But, you know, we try not to put guys in a box and say, okay, here is your role because, you know, you might not discover some skills or some ability that your guys have if you just tell them they can only do one thing or two things. So we kind of let our guys establish that for themselves, and then I think they have a very clear idea of what they can do to help the team.
I sense in talking to some of the other coaches a cohesiveness around the University of Maine coaching staff right now that I haven't seen in some time, and I think part of that is certainly due to the work of new athletic director Carlton Creech. Do you feel that from a coaching perspective, that you've got a staff that seems to be much more on the same page?
There's no doubt, and I don't know if we're more on the same page, obviously, because I wasn't here before Carlton, but Carlton has really done a great job of sort of pulling the entire athletic department together as one team and sort of get everybody pulling on the same rope. And I've been blown away, quite honestly, with how impressive, invested, talented the coaches are for all of these sports. You know, you've got a guy like Jack Cosgrove, who's, you know, won plenty of games and has it all, you know, has figured out how to run a championship program here. And it's not like he just stays in his own wing and doesn't share his ideas or doesn't interact. I mean, everybody is invested in the success of every program, and that's really a cool thing to be a part of.
I sense there's a lot of excitement among the fans, too, eager to see your team in action and what they'll bring to the court. What are you hearing from the fan base?
There is a lot of excitement. I think part of that is just that we're new, but you know better than anyone how intense the basketball culture is in the state of Maine. So there is a lot of buzz, and I think we have to do a great job of connecting with our fans and putting a team out there that competes in a manner that they want to root for, and that's what we're striving to do. So the buzz and the energy from our fans is certainly going to be part of our foundation. And we're excited about that.
Maine basketball coach on the men's side, Bob Walsh, from earlier in the week on Downtown with Rich Kimball, which you can, of course, hear right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket from 4 to 6 p.m. on weekdays. This is the Best of Downtown, where we recap the best and greatest guests from the week that was and also dig deep into the archive once in a while. And we're actually going to do that when we come back from this break. Our interview from around a year ago with the great historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. She was on last year talking about her new book, and she'll talk about some presidents right around election season when we come back after this break. You're listening to Downtown, the best of edition here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
It's the Best of Downtown, Sunday morning, previously recorded edition of the program. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole here with you. Live show tomorrow. Maine coach Jack Cosgrove will be with us, so we'll recap the Patriots game, latest on the World Series as well, Alan Adams movie reviews, and much more. Just over a week to go till Election Day, and I think everybody feels about the same way. It can't come quickly enough.
Is it over yet? Please let it be over.
No more signs, no more commercials. We can get on to the regular business. It is an opportune time for us, though, to dip into the archives from earlier this year and talk about not elections per se, but about presidents. Our friend, the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, chatted with us earlier this year upon the release of her newest book. It's entitled The Bully Pulpit. Wonderful story of the relationship between two friends, two presidents who went their separate ways politically, William Howard Taft and Theodore Roosevelt. Let's go back into the files a few months for our conversation with historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin.
It was indeed. I mean, I think the reason it takes me so long is that I really want to try and get into the lives of the people that I'm writing about as deeply as possible, which means reading their letters, their private journals, their diaries, and it's the great pleasure of my life to do it. But it does. I'm not into rapid writing, I'm afraid.
Well, Roosevelt's such a fascinating character, and for people who don't know, he actually coined the phrase bully pulpit. In many ways was the first mass media president, and as someone who had been an author and a historian, he understood writers, he was comfortable around them, and welcomed them into his inner circle.
Absolutely. You know, in a democracy, for a leader to be able to reach his countrymen with language that they can understand, and he often said that his Harvard friends would think he talked in too folksy language. He had all these little sayings, speak softly and carry a big stick. He even gave Maxwell House the slogan, good to the very last drop. And the press adored his colorful personality. He was always doing something, whether it was bear hunting or wrestling or boxing. But more importantly, as your question suggests, as a writer himself, he respected other writers, and he knew that he had to treat them with respect, even when they criticized him, not to cut them off, but rather to accept their criticism and even learn from it sometimes, just as they had to accept his criticism when he felt they were going too far in what they were saying. My favorite story of that is after a review was written of one of the books he wrote about the Rough Riders during the Spanish-American War, a memoir, and one of the journalists wrote that he was so at the center of everything in his book, he might have called it Alone in Cuba. And he then wrote back to the journalist, said, I regret to tell you my family and friends adored your book, and your book review, rather. Now you owe me one. You have to come visit me. I've long wanted to see you. So it's that give and take that makes it so unusual for a president and a press to have the kind of remarkable relationships they did.
Well, he was able to find partners in his reform efforts as a progressive with people like Ida Tarbell, Ray Stannard Baker, Lincoln Steffens, William Allen White, and the people at McClure's who embraced the term muckraker as a badge of honor, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know that much about them, and uncovering this group of people who were such comrades and such close friends and emotionally related to one another in that one magazine of McClure's was a real discovery for me. And, you know, historians have said, and I've seen it in secondary works, you know, that they really had a huge impact on that era. But when I studied them all individually and saw the impact that Ida Tarbell's work on Standard Oil had with breaking up Standard Oil, Ray Baker's stuff on the railroad abuses had to do with railroad regulation, Lincoln Steffens' material on the corruption of cities brought in new mayors and toppled old bosses. It was really thrilling to uncover this cast of characters, because what happens for me when I spend so much time is I really begin to feel like I know these people, and their writings were so good, and they were such full-bodied creatures that to have lived with him over this period of time became a real treasure.
Well, the fascinating story here is the relationship, one of many fascinating stories, but the relationship between Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, who comes across as such a sympathetic character in the book, someone who was clearly not as comfortable with the press and the trappings of the job, talked about the fact that he would much have preferred perhaps to be on the Supreme Court as he was later in life, and approached the whole progressive movement in a much more methodical fashion, and one that Roosevelt was not happy with when he came back, and fascinating to watch the changes in their relationship.
You know, it's true. I mean, when I started the book, I knew, of course, that he had run for the presidency with Teddy's blessing in 1908, and that they had ended up breaking and running against each other in 1912. But I knew very little about the depth of the friendship that preceded those two events. And they had started becoming friends when they were in their early 30s, had written 400 letters to one another, had backed one another when they were young men. They were both young reformers in an age before the progressive movement in a certain sense. So it made the rupture when it came much more heartbreaking, much more touching to me, really, than it would have been before, because I knew them both. And I really had much more empathy for Taft than I thought I would at the beginning. He was a decent man. He had loyalty. He was amiable. People loved him. He just did not have, as your question suggested, that ability to know how to deal with the press and be a public leader, and he fell short in that dimension it was much more complicated than simply that he was more conservative than Teddy Roosevelt, because I'm not sure at that time that was as true as we later thought it would be.
We're talking with Doris Kearns Goodwin, the author of The Bully Pulpit, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and the Golden Age of Journalism. Are there some parallels between that battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party a century ago and what's going on today?
Yeah, it certainly seems so. I mean, when I started the book so many years ago, it wasn't as much of an echo as it seems to be now. But obviously what was going on in 1912 was there was this big split in the Republican Party, not simply when Roosevelt ran, but it had been building over several years. In that case, it was a split between the conservatives, who were the majority of the party, and a progressive wing on the left that was wanting to move the country forward in ways of social justice and economic opportunity more than the conservatives. But they began to be really angry with one another, calling each other names. It ends up at the Republican convention with them shouting thief and liar at one another. And, of course, when the two wings run against each other in Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, they divide the Republican vote, and Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, wins. So, you've always got dissensions in parties, but what you're seeing now between the Tea Party and the mainstream Republicans are that same kind of angry vitriol that we saw in 1912, and a real willingness to publicly air their divisions, which often doesn't happen, and maybe the potential of a split in that party, which will be a cautionary tale, I think, to the Republicans if it happens. From 1912, it didn't end up well for them.
Well, as someone who teaches history when I'm not on the radio, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I did not know one of the most interesting characters in the book until I read the book, and that's Captain Archie Butt. What a fascinating guy.
Oh, I think I sort of fell a little in love with Archie Butt, and thank God for history that he kept these letters that he wrote to his mother first and his sister-in-law over the period of time when he served as military aide to both Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. He had been a journalist before he became a military person, had a wonderful writing skill, loved gossip, loved telling what was going on, and really got close enough to both men that he could record for history how they felt about each other, what this break meant, especially to William Howard Taft. And then at a certain point, what so saddened me was that he was so caught between the love of both men when Theodore Roosevelt announced that he was going to run against Taft, that he just needed to rest and take a vacation, and Taft encouraged him to go. And then at the last minute, he decided, I can't leave Taft in the midst of all this fighting. But Taft said, you have to go, rest, and come home, and you'll be with me. And he went to Europe, and he came home on the Titanic, and of course lost his life. And when he died, I really felt it as a personal sting because I felt so close to him because his writing was so extraordinary.
Author, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, as we go deep into the archives for that interview from last year around this time, talking about some presidents of yesteryear here on Downtown. The best of edition here on this Sunday morning. Glad to have you alongside us as well on the 26th day of October 2014. If you're still looking for your Halloween costume, well, you've waited way too long. You're probably going to have to go and get a picked over one at the store or have to come up with some ingenious idea yourself. But I wish you the best of luck with Halloween coming up in just a couple of short days on Friday. We'll take our final break on the program. When we come back, though, we'll preview what's ahead for Monday's edition, Tuesday's edition, and all of that coming up here on Downtown with Rich Kimball, again, which you can hear weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. So we'll do that after the break as you're listening to the best of Downtown, Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Ready to wrap it up here in a Sunday morning best of Downtown. Thanks to everybody on the show today. Gary Tanguay, Jesse Connolly, Howie Day, Maine coach Bob Walsh, and, of course, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Patriots football starts at 10 this morning. The pregame show with Gary and Andy Gresh. Kickoff a little after 1. Bob Sosi and Scott Zolak on the call. We'll be on live tomorrow afternoon with Maine football coach Jack Cosgrove. We'll recap all the weekend's football action as well as the latest on the World Series. Alan Adams, the Maine Edge, has his movie reviews. We talk theater with Barry Newport of Penobscot Theater. Tobin Slavin will have a social media minute, and, of course, Steve McKay with the weather for the week as well. Have yourself a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy the football today or whatever else you choose to do. Don't forget Dale Duff and Clem Labrie in the morning pitch tomorrow at 6. We'll see you with a live downtown tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
All the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know.